Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. Whenever you may be watching today, welcome. As the world seems to be falling apart, are you looking for some hope and help to make it through today? Louis Sperry Schaefer was a longtime professor, then president of Dallas Theological Seminary. He would meet with the students in chapel towards the end of the week. Most of the students would be going out around the country preaching and teaching that weekend. And he would challenge them in chapel. Men, go out and give the people something to believe in this weekend. That's really my mission for today as we meet and whenever we can get together, is to give you something that you can believe in. We all need something to believe in. But that something must be believable. And believable not only yesterday, but today, and also for tomorrow. You know, I can go up in an airplane, and I can decide to jump out of an airplane without a parachute. And all the way out and all the way down, I can be screaming at the top of my lungs, I believe I can fly. I believe I can fly. I believe I can fly. If you're a normal person, I know it's going through your mind right now. He cannot fly. He cannot fly. He did not fly. We all need something to believe in, but that something must be believable. It must be connected to truth. It's insane to believe a lie like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute with all the faith in the world that I can fly, but it being impossible for a human. It's insane to believe that lie. It is equally as foolish to neglect, to not embrace truth. The truth that is there for us in this health crisis that is affecting all the world. Today, our truth for today centers around this statement. Even when life seems to be upside down, it is always right side up for God's people. When the world seems upside down, when everything seems like it's falling apart, it is always right side up when it's rooted in heaven. What does right side living look like today? And what will right side living look like tomorrow for each of us? Where the Word of God, God's Word, eternal truth, is our source for answers, is the answer to this significant life question for each and every one of us. Today I'm going to share with you true glue that grabs in this health crisis, in any circumstance that you're going to find yourself in life. True glue that grabs, that holds, that helps every day and in any crisis. As we started off last week, we're going to continue today in Psalm 46. Let me begin reading that for us, and you can follow along in your scriptures. One of the translations I'm going to read this morning, this is what we read in verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. If you have a pen or a highlighter, underline those words, two words, not fear. Not fear though the earth give away, not fear though the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, not fear though its waters roar and foam, the mountains quake with their surging. And then there's a kind of a pause put in there. You see that word Selah. Causes us to pause. It may be a musical term. And it causes us to take a breath, make sure our brains are engaged, and jump into another chunk of truth. There is a river whose streams Make glad the city of God, we read in verse 4, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. Grab your pencil or pen, highlighter again, and highlight those two words, not fall. God will help her, excuse me, at break of day. Nations are in an uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts us up his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Maybe just circle that verse. We're going to come back to it. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolation he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear, burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. We have a repeat in verse 11, essentially of verse 7, which accentuates verse 1. What do we got as our refuge, our strength? Verse 7, the Lord Almighty is with us. He's our fortress. And the psalm ends, the Lord Almighty is with us. He is our fortress. All right, let's grab some true glue and apply it to our lives. And as we do that, we're going to find that it holds us in every chapter of life and helps us in every chapter of life. It began on April 22nd. Seemed like just a few days ago. It's described as the most difficult year in his life. It's not talking specifically about you there or me there. Those are the words of Martin Luther. The year is 1527. Martin Luther, a key figure in the Reformation, is feeling the strain of it all. The Reformation has been going on for 10 years. He's at the heart, he's at the core of it, and he's feeling the pressure. Mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually. He's exhausted, and in the middle of preaching, he begins to feel dizzy, feels so dizzy, so sick, he quits in the middle of preaching a sermon. Soon he's bedridden. He finds himself isolated and questioning everything. What am I doing? Is this worth it? What should I be doing? Is my life soon to be over? But wait, that's not it. It's even worse. The Black Plague, the dreaded Black Plague that killed millions of people on Earth at that time in history, has now entered the country of Germany, has now landed in Luther's community town of Wittenberg. And many people are fleeing town, fleeing for their lives. Yet Luther and his wife Katie believe that God is calling them to stay, to help the people who are sick and dying. Now Katie, Luther's wife, is pregnant with their second child at this time. And still they transform their home into a hospital that's soon full, overflowing with people who've been affected by the Black Plague. And they're in their home, their living quarters. They see their friends dying before them. But wait, that's not it. That's not all. Then, without warning, Luther's 1-year-old son became suddenly very seriously ill. And death is surrounding Luther on every side. And with all those circumstances, with all those challenges in this chapter of his life, Luther is driven to seek refuge in God as never before. And as we step into history, as we step into this story, we find a broken man who chooses to believe, who chooses to further embrace eternal truth. Psalm 46 becomes the true glue that holds Luther and helps Luther in his crisis. And the words of the 46th Psalm and the words of Martin Luther bless us today with these majestic words. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark that never fails. Our helper he amid the flood. Goes on to say, as the song winds down, that song, A Mighty Fortress is Our God, penned by Luther, rooted in Psalm 46. It ends this way. The body they may kill, God's truth abideth still. His kingdom is forever. That, my friends, is right side up living. That is living that is rooted and grounded with confidence in a God who is in control. That is belief that is believable and worth being the foundation of our life. God's truth remains, abides still. Let's look at verse 2. Last week, as we looked at how not to waste a good crisis, we looked a lot at verse 1 of Psalm 46, and we're going to pick it up there again and really begin our focus in verse 2. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. We do not fear. True glue number 1. God's truth holds. This glue holds. You can believe it because it is eternally and everyday believable. There's no panic in heaven today, only heaven's plans for history. There is no panic in heaven, only plans for God's glory and for our growth in this crisis. Now, right at the end of verse 1, God is a refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Let's look at that last phrase as it fleshes out and gives us some help in regards to the command in verse 2 to not fear. Ever-present help in trouble. In trouble. Ever find yourself in trouble? Are we in trouble today as a world, as a community, health-wise? That word trouble, there in the language of the Psalms, the Hebrew language, means to be in a tight place, to be restricted. Think about what people are going through today and how this word just applies so well. To be in a tight place, to be restricted, tied up, in a narrow, cramped place, suffocating by circumstances. That sounds like a lot of life for many people today, all around the world. And God says He is our ever-present help in those times of trouble. So I do not fear. I do not fear when life falls apart, because God never loosens His grip on history or eternity. What do we learn a bit about this glue that holds us in times of crisis? Well, in verse 1 and throughout the psalm, we see this theme kind of repeated again and again. God is our refuge. God is our refuge. Last week, we looked at 3 stabilizing truths about God being our refuge and shelter. We learned a couple stabilizing or quieting truths: that we are never alone in isolation. We are never abandoned in any attack from the outside as God's people. We are never adrift without an anchor that will not hold in any challenging storm of life. God is my refuge. God is our refuge. That stabilizes us. But wait, there's even more. An ever-present help. Help. An anchor that holds. He is our refuge. He stabilizes us. And in the helping process, he holds us. Now, those two things are going to come out, and they kind of spill into each other. God is our refuge. God is our hiding place. Now, when we think of hiding, we often think of isolation. I'm going to get off the grid, get away from all this trouble, and just kind of wait the storm out. Well, God being our refuge and shelter, there's a protective aspect to it, that stabilizing aspect, kind of getting us out of the rain, out of the danger, but it doesn't stop there. And our Christian life isn't about hiding in a corner or hiding with a group of people cut off and, in a sense, abandoning the world. God is also, as it talks about God as our hiding place, there is a resupply aspect to it as well as a stabilizing aspect. Resupply truths as well as stabilizing truths. This isn't just escaping from life, but being in the presence of God for him to give us what we need to re-engage history, to re-enter life. As you work through this psalm and a plethora of many songs, and really throughout the scriptures, we find time and time again, God is our help. This is going to lead us into the second glue in just a moment, but they kind of work together, so we're going to build on this first one for just a moment more. His holding hands are also helping hands. God is my hiding place. And the help that he brings us and the hold that he gives us is strong, it's sufficient, it's sustaining, and also it is swift. It is strong. His hands equip us for everything we need for today and for tomorrow. His hands are sufficient. Ever-present help. That means exceedingly abundant and exceedingly available. What that meant from the Old Testament writer who used that particular song. The help that he is going to provide is sufficient. It is sustaining. It never lets us down. And then if you, let's move over into verse 4 and verse 5. And we look at the second glue, or some more true glue. We're not exhausting it today. True glue, God's truth holds. And number 2, true glue, God's truth helps. Let's see where the help comes from and how it's kind of fleshed out, laid out for us. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is with her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Some of you English translations will say at dawn or at the break of dawn. There's no panic in heaven. Only God's plans that continue forward. There are also no lies in heaven. Again, we all need something to believe in, but what we believe in must be believable. What is rooted in heaven, what comes from heaven, is believable because there's no lies in heaven. Only life-giving, life-sustaining truth. God is our help. God is our help in this moment and in the moments in the days to come. In this chapter of life, in the chapters of life that may continue to unfold before us. That help is ready. That help is always on the right time. God is with her and her. Look in a moment, the city of Jerusalem, with the people of God. God will help her at the break of day, at the break of dawn, the beginning of dawn. God's help is always on the right time. From our perspective, seems like God is often not early. It seems that he's often not late. But if we had the correct time, heaven's time, we'll discover that God's timing is never wrong. It's always right. It's right time. And let's see from verse 4, it's river time. We, in our church here in Indiana, we have people that live in different time zones. That's been a unique element of ministry in this church. We have to be very clear on when things start, when things end. Is it fast time? Is it slow time? Central time? Eastern time? Well, good news for all of us. We live and we minister on river time. I do not fear because God is in control. I do not faint. Verse 5, I do not fall. Even when life drains my energy and emotions, I do not faint because God will help at the right time. God's my refuge. He's also my river. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. God is my river. Now, the scene in this psalm just makes a dramatic shift. In verse 1, verse 2, we have like these earthquakes, mountain shaking, everything is chaotic. You kind of get the feeling you're in this tsunami, this tornado effect, where it seems that everything may be falling apart, coming apart. And in verse 4, it shifts dramatically and uses the element of water to emphasize to us when God glue, true glue, God's truth applies to our life, what a change it makes. The scene shifts from the turbulent, chaotic waters to waters of calm, waters that refresh, waters that, in a sense, recreate God's initial paradise, God's initial creation. Now, water is often a key issue in a crisis. In history, back as we step into the time of these Psalms, when a group of people would attack another group of people, they could cut off their water supply. The city being attacked was in grave danger, and that happened to Jerusalem on a number of occasions because Jerusalem had and still has a water crisis. It's not like the majority of other cities there in the Mid-East, built on, located near a river. Babylon had the Euphrates. The city of Nineveh had the Tigris River. Rome, the Tiber River. The cities of Egypt were located along the Nile River. Jerusalem was located along no river. And when their water supply was threatened, they were in great danger. And God uses this picture in this psalm to kind of reinforce the message, the truth, the hope and the help for his people, for God's people, that he will be their river. And for us today, grasp this fact. God is our river. He's our river of help. He's our river of hope. His presence will be their provision. His presence will be their protection. His presence will be their peace. His presence will be their source of productivity. And as for the people of God in the Old Testament, so for the people of God today, including us as a church, we can wrap our feelings around these facts. God's testimony to us is clear. My God will supply all your needs. My God will supply all our needs. He's our refuge. He's our river. He's our holding hand. He's our helping hand. We'll just wrap it up right here. Give you a couple nuggets to chew on for as we look at coming back to Psalm 46 last week or next week. In verse 10, be still and know that I am God. God is our helping hand. He knows what he's doing. We just read it in verse 5. God will help her. God will help us at the break of dawn. God's timing is perfect. Again in verse 10, God will be exalted. He will be exalted in this crisis. His timing will be perfect in this crisis. He knows what he is doing. Our job is to hold on, let him help us, and move forward through the open doors that God has given us. We all need truth to believe in. Here's truth to believe in because it's believable, because it flows from the heart and the hands of heaven itself. So the question for all of us, do we have a right side up mindset right now? Are we glued down in God's truth? You know, a crisis, the wind, the storms always threaten us, challenge us. What are we really holding on to? And this psalm helps us to hold on to the right things and to see how God holds us and to let that grip and that relationship get strengthened. Well, these truths are for God's people, which begs the question, which is a key question in your life. Are you one of God's people? If you were to succumb to this crisis or to some other issue, where would you be eternally? Do you have that saving relationship with Jesus Christ? God did what we could not do for ourselves, providing his Son as the perfect solution, the sacrifice for our sins. To come back to have peace with God, we need to admit that we don't have peace with God. We need to admit that we're not perfect. In fact, that we're sinners. And that sin, our sin, my sin, disconnects us from a holy God. The hope that I have is that what Jesus Christ did, because of who Jesus Christ is, makes all the difference in my life. I need to admit that I'm a sinner, believe that Jesus Christ is God, and accept the gift of salvation that God is offering to you right now. That is how you become one of God's people, one of God's followers. It doesn't stop there. For me and for many of us who have done this, who have walked with God for years, we're called to look at where we are fearing more than trusting God, where we are fainting more than standing strong, where we're going through the motions, and to re-engage with God in a way that is fresh and new today. A mighty fortress is our God. That fortress never fails. His truth never fails, and his kingdom will never fail. Our hope is in the God of the universe, the God of history. His truth helps, his truth holds, His truth is the answer for your life today. God bless you. Look forward to studying with you again real soon.